We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Glory UGA podcast, the podcast designed for all of you diehard Georgia fans by a diehard Georgia fan. And it's a Top 5 Thursday here today on the show, guys, as I reveal my list of Georgia football's top 5 X Factor players entering the 2025 season. So we're going to have a ton of fun with that. But before we get there, if you are one of those Georgia diehards, go ahead, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn those notifications on. If you enjoy this video, if you like this content, please like the video and leave me comments, guys. Let me know who are your top X Factors for this Georgia football team in the 2025 season. But all right, we are now at this point deep into my summer top 5 series. We started about a month or so ago with my top 5 breakout players. Then we did a top 5 sleeper prospects. We did impact freshmen last week. And you can still go back and check out all those episodes. I think you guys will enjoy those videos. But today we're turning the page and we're talking X Factors for the 2025 Georgia football team. Now, as always, with each of these episodes, we've got to start this conversation by defining what an X Factor player is to me. I want to make sure we're speaking the same language here. So personally, you might see a little bit differently, but I define an X Factor as a player that has some questions. Like there's questions surrounding that player coming into the season. Players that have a certain element of the unknown around them coming into the new season where it's really hard to know exactly what to expect from them, be it because of like they're new to the program, maybe they've been around but they haven't really produced at a high level for whatever reason, maybe it's inexperience, maybe they're taking on a new role this season or projected to take on a new role, maybe injuries have hampered them in the past, maybe they're moving up a level, whatever it might be. But these are guys that have that element of unknown around them, but are also guys that we have reason to believe that if everything clicks for them, if they put it all together this season, they could be absolute game changers for Georgia in 2025. So when I say X Factor, that's what I'm talking about. Just want to make sure we're speaking the same language there. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the list. We're going to start number 5. We'll work our way all the way up to number 1. And honestly, guys, these 5 players, like, you could put them in any order. I had a hard time figuring out who should be 1, who should be 2, 3, whatever. You can put them in whatever order you want. But I know you guys like to have them ranked, so I got them ranked for you. And coming in at number 5, I've got defensive lineman Jordan Hall. I'm fascinated by what Jordan Hall can be for Georgia in 2025. The production hasn't been there yet to this point in his career, going into year 3 in the red and black. But let's travel back a couple years ago, guys. Coming out of high school, let's not forget what Jordan Hall was. He was a 5-star top 30 prospect nationally, a top 5 defensive lineman in the country. I know people are really upset right now, losing out on James Johnson, flipping from Georgia, going to Texas, losing out on Justice Terry last year at Texas. I know that people are frustrated about that, and I get it, because we need to make sure that we are strong along the defensive line. That's a big part of how Georgia won back-to-back national titles back in 21 and 22. But we also have some really talented players on this Georgia defensive line coming into 2025. Jordan Hall is certainly one of those guys. A 5-star coming out of high school, did play some as a freshman, not a ton, but he got his feet wet and played a little bit, enough to where we had big expectations. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I had some pretty big expectations for Jordan Hall coming into last season prior to getting into spring practice and fall camp. And we all know what happened at this point. He suffered 2 serious injuries. It started off with a stress fracture in the early part of the offseason in one of his legs. And then overcompensating happened. And we thought he'd come back at some point, like mid to late fall camp. And then he suffers a stress fracture on the other leg. That's tough for anybody, for anyone, but certainly guys as big as Jordan Hall who are 300 plus pounds, 320 pounds, and you're putting all that weight on your legs when you're walking. That's incredibly difficult. So those are 2 really tough injuries for him to battle back from. And that entirely derailed his 2024 campaign. He played a little bit, a handful of snaps last season for us late in the year, but was not really a factor because of injuries. But again, let's go back to what Jordan Hall was coming out of high school. And what you were coming out of high school doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to be at the next level. We see that every year, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that. But if you go back and watch this guy's tape, he was the real deal coming out of high school. He was dominant at the all-star practices in the aftermath of his senior season. So if he can live up to his potential, if he can bounce back from the injury-plagued 2024 season and live up to his potential at 6'4", 320 pounds, Jordan Hall could completely change the face, the dynamic of Georgia's defense. 100% he could. He, at 6'4", 320, has some positional versatility. He's athletic enough to play some 3-tech for us, but he's also big enough and strong enough at the point of attack to also anchor and play that 0-tech nose guard where he can command double teams for Georgia. And if he can do that effectively, well, we have a number of guys, I think, at the 3-tech with guys like Christian Miller, Xavier McLeod, and even Elijah Griffin, the 5-star true freshman defensive tackle. We have a number of guys that I believe can win one-on-one matchups on the interior consistently if they're given those opportunities. They might not be given those opportunities if we don't have a nose guard that can, a 0-tech that can actually eat up double teams, that can hold that point of attack the way that Jordan Davis did in years past. And look, I know that Not Stackhouse did a really good job for us, but he wasn't the same guy. He wasn't the same build as a guy like Jordan Davis. And look, Jordan Hall's not quite as big as Jordan was back in the day, obviously, but he's closer to that. I think he's stronger at the point of attack. So if he can be that guy, can command double teams, also give you a little pass rush and push from the interior of your defense, that opens up more one-on-one opportunities for some of those quicker guys off the line of scrimmage at the 3-tech that can win those one-on-one matchups, and again, that can completely change the face of Georgia's defense. It's just a matter of him being healthy, getting back to speed, getting confident out there. If he can be that guy, anywhere close to that guy, that could be huge for Georgia's defense in 2025. All right, coming in number 4, I've got another defensive player. This one's a newcomer. Transfer from Army, Elo Madozi, edge rusher, jack linebacker. You guys know what Georgia's losing. If you're a diehard Georgia fan, if you're watching this video, I imagine you are. You know what we're losing rushing the passer from a year ago. Guys, we're losing our top 7 sack guys from last year. It's not just Jalen Walker. It's not just Chaz Jamison and Michael. It's not just those guys. It's our top 7 sack guys from a year ago. We need to go out and find somebody that can be an answer at that position. And that's exactly what we went out and got in Madozi in the spring transfer portal window. He had 6.5 sacks for Army last year, had an impressive pressure rate over 14% at 6'3", 245 with the athleticism that he brings to the table, the explosive pass rush ability off the edge. He could absolutely be another one of those game changers for the Georgia defense in 2025. But the question around him, I love the talent. I love what I've seen on tape from him. But the question is, with him moving up a level, will he be as effective in the SEC as he was in the American Conference last year? I believe the answer it can be yes, but it's still a question. We still don't know yet. How effective can he be setting the edge in the SEC? I think the pass rush skills will absolutely translate. The question I have is, okay, at 6'3", 245, can you set the edge with authority the way that we're going to need you to in our defense to where you can be an every down player for Georgia and not just a third down dime package specialist, which if that's what he ends up being, he can still be an effective player for us in that role, but he won't be as impactful for us if he can find a way to be an every down type player for us at that edge position, at that jack linebacker spot. And to be able to do that, he's going to have to show that he can be an effective setter of the edge. And that's a question I have for him, again, moving up from the American Conference to big boy football here in the SEC. But if the answer to those questions, him moving up a level, being able to set the edge, does the pass rush skill still translate the way that it did in the ACC to the SEC? If the answer to those questions is yes, Elo Madozi, make no mistake about it, could be a massive answer to one of the biggest questions on this Georgia defense in terms of, do we have answers rushing the passer the way that we did a year ago? All right, coming in at number 3, we're going to go the offensive side of the football here, and we're going to go with an offensive lineman. And at number 3, I've got offensive tackle Ernest Green. Now, hear me out here, guys. I know when I say that name, some of you dismiss that out of hand, and I get it. I get it, guys. I understand. I've watched the guy play the past couple years just like you have. And to be perfectly honest, those of you who've been with this podcast for a long time, you know how I feel about Ernest Green. I think right now you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that covers Georgia football that has been harder on Ernest Green than I have publicly. All right? I'll just say it outright. I have been very hard on the guy. But at the same time, I've also been clear in saying, and I'll say it again here, even though the play, in my opinion, has been very subpar from Ernest Green the past year, certainly last year, there have always been extenuating circumstances with Ernest Green. Okay, if you go back to his true freshman year, he was doing some big things in fall camp, making a name for himself. You were hearing some buzz around his name. And then about midway through the year, the guy screws his back up and has midseason back surgery. And anyone who's had any sort of back injury, you know how debilitating that can be and how difficult it is to recover from and come back from those type of injuries, even if you are a young guy. And when you're as big as Ernest Green is, it even further complicates the recovery process. So that was his true freshman year. Then he comes back as a redshirt freshman and becomes a starter for Georgia at left tackle. And he was up and down. Now, at the beginning of the year, I was very concerned about Ernest Green in 2023. I made that very clear on this podcast. We weren't really doing the YouTube thing back then. On the audio side, I was making it very clear how I felt about Ernest Green. I didn't think he was good enough. But as I watched him more and more as the year progressed, I thought he showed signs of improvement. Early in the year in 2023 as a redshirt freshman's first-year starter, I don't think the guy knew what he was doing. And I get it. You missed half your freshman year with a back injury and you weren't practicing, you missed all those reps. I get it. You're a first-year starter. And he did improve in those things. But at the time, he didn't know what he was doing. His feet were stuck in concrete sometimes. I didn't think that he was anchoring. I don't think he was very strong at the point of attack at that left tackle position. And then last year, I never liked what I saw from him. It only got worse as the year went on. But again, it was injury related with Ernest Green last year. He was one of several offensive linemen for us that was out there playing games, but wasn't really doing much at practice because he was that banged up. And we just didn't really have enough options behind him that we could say, hey, Ernest, you know what? Just go ahead, man. Let's take a couple of weeks off. Let's get you better. Get some treatment, get recovered. We didn't have guys that we felt were ready to step in and be those guys early last year. So he had to kind of grit his teeth and go out there, and I give him credit for it. But the play was absolutely subpar, right? Absolutely was. But again, there was an injury situation there. And as I always say with Ernest Green, personally, I will die on this hill. I think he's much more of a guard than he is a tackle. I don't think he quite has the foot quickness, as I haven't seen it yet from him. Maybe that's because he hasn't been fully healthy. Maybe that's a part of it. I think he's much more of a tackle. I think he could be a good kind of road grading. I think he's more of a guard than he is a tackle. I think he'd be a good road grading guard. Tackle, I have questions about him being able to hold up against speed rushers off the edge, because we've seen him get victimized by that time and time again. But saying all of that, a lot like Jordan Hall, we have to go back and remember what Ernest Green was coming out of high school. This guy was a fringe 5-star. He was a top 50 national player in the entire country coming out of the state of California. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll end up being a great player. The history books are littered with top 50, top 100 guys, even 5-star guys that did not end up being what their prep rankings suggested that they would be, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be great for Georgia, that he'll ever turn it around here in Athens. But I do believe if he can get back to being healthy, if he can have a truly healthy year, which would be like the first really fully healthy year that this guy has ever had, which, oh, by the way, this is a money year for Ernest Green. This is year 4 for this guy. All right, guys, this is year 4. This is a straight up money year for Ernest. If he can capitalize on that potential he had coming out of high school, and if he can stay healthy, which I think is certainly possible, I think that this guy could absolutely have his best year at Georgia. And look, guys, we all know the issues that Georgia had on the offensive line a year ago. You don't need me to tell you that. We all saw that. It's been talked about ad nauseum all offseason long. But if Green can take a step, if he can figure it out, if things can finally click for him now at right tackle, which if he's going to play tackle, I'm much more comfortable with him at right tackle than left tackle. If he can do that, if he can live up to that top 50 billing or come anywhere close to that, and you match him with a healthy Monroe Freeling at left tackle, who another guy that wasn't fully healthy last year, Georgia might actually end up being significantly better at offensive tackle than we were a year ago, which was our biggest issue in the offensive line. The interior, we were fine. Tackle, that was the problem for us. But Ernest Green can be a big part of the answer for Georgia's offensive line if he can stay healthy and if he can start to live up to that top 50 billing. He could be one of those big answers to another one of Georgia's biggest questions from a year ago. And if he ends up being that type of guy, he could absolutely improve our run game, which would set up play action. We have a quarterback that can hit the play action vertical shots down the field. It could protect Gunner more than we were able to protect Carson Beck a year ago. And that could help us get back to that Georgia football offensive formula that helped us win those back-to-back national titles. And Ernest Green could, emphasis on the word could, be a big part of that. So that's why I see Ernest as an X factor. I don't know. I don't know if he'll be that guy. That's why he's an X factor. I don't know. But if he can be, that would be huge for this Georgia football team. All right, moving into the number 2 spot. I've got a guy that I toyed around with being the number 1 player on this list, but ultimately I had him come in at number 2, and that's wide receiver Colby Young. Now, I think there are a number of wide receivers that could have qualified for this list. We'll get to that when we get to our honorable mentions at the end of the show here, but I settled on Colby Young as that wide receiver. At 6'3", 215 pounds, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Let's be real. The production to this point at the college level has been relatively modest. Last year at Georgia, 11 catches for 149 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, didn't play a full year. We know why. And then at Miami, over the course of 2 years, 79 catches, 939 yards, 10 touchdowns. Not scrub numbers, but not spectacular. It doesn't scream like difference maker at receiver. But Colby Young is a guy, if you travel back to about this time last year, I was very adamant in saying that I felt Colby Young could be that alpha receiver for Georgia at the X position. Obviously, it did not work out that way. We all know what happened with the domestic violence charges and accusations, and that cost him at least half of last year, and then he was banged up at the beginning of the year, so wasn't playing that much early, but even before the accusations and before the charges came down. So obviously, it didn't work out that way last year. But this year, going into 2025, I'm not backing away from it, guys. I am not backing down. I am doubling down on my Colby Young take from a year ago. He now has a year in the system. I know he missed some time last year, but he had all last offseason. He came back during the latter part of the season last year, wasn't playing games for us, but was cleared to go through practices when he was cleared by our Title IX office. Obviously, he still had some outstanding legal issues there, but our Title IX office cleared him, which kind of cleared the path for him to come back to the team, at least start practicing with us. So he's not like learning things on the fly the way that he was coming into last year. He now has a quarterback in Gunnar Stockton, which I've made clear several times the offseason that I believe is going to be able to get him the ball down the field more efficiently and more accurately. And a lot like Ernest Green, this is a money year for Colby Young, guys. This is year 4 for him. Like, obviously, he has his sights set on the NFL, and I do believe, again, I'm doubling down on that, he can absolutely be that alpha wide receiver, that alpha number 1 wide receiver that Georgia was looking for all of last year and honestly never found. And if he can be that guy, or anything remotely close to it, that will open up the entire Georgia offense in 2025. You guys saw it time and time again last year, week after week after week. Teams are loading the box against us to stop the run game. They completely stifled our run game because we didn't have anyone that can make them pay consistently on the outside. We didn't have that explosive big play ability on the outside. Obviously, Arian Smith could get vertical, but he dropped the football from time to time. Carson Beck had trouble hitting him. But with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, a guy who's shown the ability to be much more proficient throwing the ball vertically down the field with accuracy, Colby Young is the kind of guy, if teams want to stack the box against us this year and try to outnumber us in the box and take away our run game, with his ability to win one-on-one outside with his size and his catch radius and his ability to high point the football, that is going to make the run game more effective and also inject a much needed infusion of explosiveness back into the Georgia offense that we just didn't have last year in the way that we'd had in previous years. So I'm looking for a big year for Colby Young, and if he can be that guy for Georgia, if he can really be that number 1 alpha X receiver that Georgia just simply could not find last year, that is a game changer for Georgia in 2025. And finally, coming in at number 1 is a guy that I know some of you probably won't classify as an X factor, but I think he fits my definition as I laid out for you at the beginning of the show, and that is linebacker Chris Cole. Guys, I'm going to tell you straight up right now, I believe in Chris Cole. I believe in the guy. You know that. I have made no secret about that all offseason going back to spring practice. I believe in the guy. But at the same time, he hasn't really done it yet on the field on any sort of consistent basis. He played about 11% of our defensive snaps a year ago, primarily in third down packages, okay? So we've seen flashes. We've seen the promise. We've seen what he can project to be at some point. We know his recruiting profile is a 5-star prospect coming out of high school back in the 2024 cycle. Those are the reasons why I believe. I have seen enough from Chris Cole to give me reason to believe that this guy can become a straight up dude for the Georgia defense. But we still need to see it consistently on Saturdays. That's the question. We just haven't seen it yet. I've seen it at practice. We've seen it in flashes during games. You saw it at G-Day a little bit. But he's got to do it consistently on the field on Saturdays between the hedges and wherever the heck else we're playing on the road. So if Chris Cole becomes what I believe that he can become this season, that completely changes the dynamic of the Georgia defense in 2025. Because what Chris Cole can help Georgia do is match up with whatever an offense wants to throw at us, right? He's you hear a lot of talk about hybrid offensive players. Chris Cole is a hybrid defensive player. And those types of players allow you to match up with whatever your opponent wants to throw at you without substituting, which is a big deal with a lot of teams running tempo offensively this year, or in this age of college football. He can absolutely be that Jalen Walker, that versatile tool for Glenn Schumann this year that we absolutely need in the Georgia defense. Jalen Walker was a nightmare matchup problem for opposing offenses last year. That guy's gone. We need somebody to be able to fill that role the way that Jalen did a year ago, and I fully believe that Chris Cole can be that guy, a game-wrecking pass rusher when we want to use him in that way. A guy that can mirror, spy, contain the quarterback on third downs. A guy that can actually step out and play some star for us situationally, help us match up with teams that want to go with heavy personnel, play with some 12 personnel, help us fit against the run, but also can still cover in space against those tight ends and receivers as well. Running backs can play some inside linebacker, give us some ranginess at that position. You know, I called Caden Prother, the tight end commitment that we got last week, I called him a unicorn because I believe that's what that guy is. And he can do a variety of things in the Georgia offense. He's one of those hybrid offensive players. But I believe that Chris Cole is one of those unicorns on the defensive side of the football for Georgia. And if it all clicks for him in year 2, and I can't promise you it will this year, but I think there's a pretty good chance it will. And if that happens, if it all clicks for him, if he figures it out this year, all I can say is watch out. Chris Cole can be an absolute game changer, difference maker for Georgia in 2025. So those are my top 5 X factors for this Georgia football team entering the 2025 season. Again, we got Chris Cole at number 1. We got Colby Young at number 2. We got Ernest Green at 3. We got Elo Madozi at 4 and Jordan Hall at 5. Before I get out of here, I do want to throw a couple of quick honorable mentions at you because, as is always the case, guys, it's hard to limit these lists to 5. When I sit down and do them, I'm like, okay, 5 guys. I end up having like a list of like 10, 11, 12 guys, and I got to pare it down and cut it down. So some guys just always end up barely missing the cut. And some of those guys on this list are defensive lineman Xavier McLeod, for a lot of the same reasons I said about Jordan Hall. Now, McLeod wasn't as highly rated coming out of high school as Jordan Hall was, but he played more last year. And down the stretch last year, when Christian Miller was out with an injury, I saw something from Xavier McLeod. That guy was able to give us some pass rush. He was strong at the point of attack. I think he could be a big answer for Georgia on the defensive line as well this year. So he's a guy that I'm certainly watching for to have a big year. And this is year 3 for him, so he could actually absolutely go pro after this year as well. Daniel Harris at cornerback. We know what we have in Dalen Everett. I feel very confident in Dalen. The other side's more of a question. Now, obviously, there's a battle going on there. Daniel Harris started the last couple games of the season for us last year. It was up and down, did some good things, showed more awareness and better ball skills than we saw from Julian Humphrey earlier in the year, but still got beat from time to time. And then you have the number 2 player in the country from the 2024 class, and Ellis Robinson the 4th. He's still battling for that position. DeMello Jones is a guy that I love. I think it's lost in the shuffle. Maybe a sleeper prospect on this team. But Daniel Harris, I still think is the odds-on favorite to start at that position. And if he can take that next step, he's got a little experience under his belt now. If he can take that next step and be better in 2025 and build on some of the good things he did at the end of last year and just become more consistent for us out there. Because the guy has length for days. He has the size, the length, the athleticism that you want at that position. He has everything that you could ask for in a cornerback. He's just got to go do it on a more consistent basis. And if he can be that guy and we can match him with Dalen Everett on the other side, like you could potentially smother opposing passing attacks. So Daniel Harris could be one of those X factors for Georgia if he can take that next step this year. So I mentioned, Colby Young was one of the wide receivers that could be a game changer for Georgia this year, and I settled on him at receiver. But I think Noah Thomas, the A&M transfer, could potentially be that guy as well. Zachariah Branch, the USC transfer in the slot, could also potentially be an answer there and could be a big-time playmaker for Georgia. So you can't forget about those guys. And then another transfer, well, I think sometimes it's lost in the shuffle because you hear a lot about Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch and Madozi, but the running back transfer from Illinois, Josh McCray, who, by the way, let's not forget, led the Fighting Illini in rushing a year ago. Now, it wasn't a 1,000-yard rush or anything like that. He split some time, but he was their leading rusher a year ago. And I think sometimes he gets lost in the shuffle because we have Nate Frazier. And we all love Nate Frazier. I love Nate Frazier. You love Nate Frazier. I'm very excited about what Nate can do in year two. Showed some really promising signs for us and was our leading rusher a year ago. I think has some explosiveness that can really help out this offense if we can get a little more room from the offensive line. But Josh McCray has the ability to be a really nice complement to what Frazier brings us, because McCray is a much bigger back and has really good feet. So he's a bigger, more powerful guy and not as fast and explosive as Nate is, but has really good feet for a big guy himself. So for a team that really struggled to run the football a year ago, and there were a variety of reasons for that. The offensive line was part of the issue, not having a big time threat on the outside that could win one-on-one and make teams pay for stacking the box against us. Those are all factors. But the running back's a part of that equation too. And I think McCray could be a really big factor for Georgia running back, maybe situationally, but I think he'll form a really nice 1-2 punch there with Nate Frazier at the top of Georgia's running back depth chart. So there you go, guys. There's a couple honorable mentions, but thank you guys so much for being here. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. We'll be back next week with another one of these top 5 episodes for you guys. So if you are a diehard Georgia fan and this is the kind of content you're looking for in your Georgia football coverage, please go ahead, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn those notifications on. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and let me know. Don't forget, who are your X factors for this Georgia football team in 2025? But thank you again for being here, guys. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs.
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.